I'm heading out to college this fall, and like any sane college student today, I plan on using computers to do my work. That's why I'll be taking my 8-year-old ThinkPad T450S and this, the 7-year-old 4th generation ThinkPad X1 Carbon. Why I'm taking both is complicated, but it pretty much boils down to the fact that each makes its own compromises. And that's really the theme of how I see the 4th gen Carbon. If you ask me, it makes a lot of unnecessary compromises. I think the biggest problem with the 4th gen Carbon is that it falls into the unhappy middle ground of laptops, especially considering how the laptop space has evolved in the 7 years since the Carbon was released. For one, its design has been outdated since launch. The screen bezels are huge, and there's no getting around the fact that the Carbon is the same size as the T450S, but feels like it wastes even more space because of how things are laid out. So much for ultra portable. One tidbit about the 4th gen specifically is that it shares a chassis with the first 3 generations of X1 Yoga, and that comes with its own problems. The hinges have a bit of lateral flexibility, meaning that you can move the screen side to side when the laptop is closed. And the hardware for the screen to auto-rotate by detecting its orientation is in the Carbon, which rarely but really annoyingly causes the screen to rotate or flip out of nowhere in both Windows and Linux. The change in design in the next generation model shows how the 4th gen design really didn't make much sense for a laptop targeting the segment that I assumed Lenovo wanted to target. And just because Lenovo made compromises on this thin and light Ultrabook doesn't mean that it doesn't have the problems that an Ultrabook has either. The biggest one for me is the almost complete lack of upgradability. Whatever CPU and more importantly memory configuration is the one that you're stuck with. My short upgrade guide for this laptop shows what little you can upgrade, which thankfully includes storage. Thermals are also constrained by the thinner build. Temperatures during a stress test were in the 80s after the best case scenario of a fresh thermal paste application. The keyboard is also arguably a downgrade because of the reduced key travel compared to other ThinkPads of the era, but I will say that it's better than modern ThinkPads and most other laptops. And I/O is decent. The 3 USB Type-A, mini DisplayPort, and HDMI ports are adequate, and it's nice to have the microSD card slot that seems too absent from modern thin and light laptops. At the end of the day though, the most important thing to most people is the experience of using the laptop on the daily. It's a mixed bag to be honest. Performance is nothing special. The dual-core, quad-thread Skylake Core i5 and i7 chips that the Carbon could be configured with are serviceable for daily use, but not much more. Transcoding a 2-minute video from VP9 to H.264, for example, took almost 3 minutes, so yeah, acceptable but not great. The integrated graphics are also okay. Minecraft 1.19 with Optifine is pretty playable, with frame rates consistently above 30 at 1440p. This generation of Intel graphics was also the first to support hardware VP9 video decoding, so it's pretty smooth watching most YouTube videos at the time of recording of this video. Overall, the specs are fine. But there are little things that aren't on the spec sheet that detract from the experience. For example, every single display option is IPS with 1080p and 1440p panels offered. However, the backlights use PWM to set brightness. This means that the backlight flickers on and off at different high frequencies, with more on time making the backlight brighter. PWM frequencies should be high enough to be undetectable, but they are low enough for the camera to pick up on my laptop's 1440p display. I don't know if it's all in my head, but sometimes I feel a bit of eye discomfort using the screen at the lowest brightness setting. In general, people with sensitive eyes may have problems with displays that use low PWM frequencies for dimming, so the 1440p 4th generation Carbon might be out of the question just for that. The audio experience is also compromised. Because the built-in speakers are literal tin cans, Lenovo shipped a Windows-only Dolby sound enhancer in the audio driver to make sound quality a bit more acceptable. I've got a few problems with this. The audio is bass boosted even on headphones, which hurts the integrity of the source audio, and the enhancement profile sometimes overboosts music to the point where dialogue is harder to hear. There is no Linux support, so tough luck on that too. Speaking of which, the fingerprint reader is single touch, so better than the swipe style ones found in older ThinkPads, but again, no Linux support. For any prospective buyers out there, I wanted to close by putting this laptop in context compared to similar offerings on the used market. At the time of writing, eBay prices generally fell in the $100 to $200 range. Newer ThinkPads will be a bit more expensive, but they fix almost all of the gripes that I had, from design to internals. The older and thicker T450S sells for about half the price of the 4th gen Carbon, but it also doesn't have most of those gripes. Not to mention that there are other options in the business-oriented space worth taking a look at, like the Dell Latitude E7470. So, seeing that my T450S doesn't have all these weird gripes, why am I still taking the X1 Carbon to college? Here's why. My T450S only has 500 gigs of storage, while the Carbon has 2 terabytes. Plus, my iTunes library is on the Carbon. Don't buy this laptop.